Oh no. Yeah. 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 Sharon, how's Paul? Okay. Oh, really? Okay. Huh. Okay.
So how long has that been since the last bloodletting? How long last week? No, 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 I mean, yeah.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
No, really?
Yeah.
I thought he had to have one, he didn't have any for a few years.
Oh, no, no, no.
He's been doing it every.
Yeah, every, like, say, 3 months.
Okay,
4
okay.
Yeah.
months. For a while, it was like every 2 weeks.
You're right, I remember that when he
Yeah.
first was diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long ago was that?
First diagnosed, I would say 2 years ago.
Yeah. Anyhow, three years.
Yeah, I know, that's it, I
Yeah.
know, time goes by so fast, that's what I
And
was
he
gonna
started
say.
slipping back, too. He started eating quite a bit more red meat.
Okay.
So, it wasn't that when we were
Right.
under control, we couldn't have any. But
Yeah.
we're supposed to really, really
Be
be careful.
careful. Yeah.
I think we stopped doing that.
Sure. Sure.
So, back on the strict regimen.
Yeah.
Yes, she is too.
Oh, so what
Yeah.
did they do? Did they do anything?
Yeah, today they did x-rays, but she didn't get antibiotics. One is infected, one has to be pulled,
Oh.
and the other one has to be filled. So she has an appointment Monday for the extraction,
Okay. That's excruciating. Yeah. 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 How are you? Good. How are you? That's the right answer. Hymn number 38 in your hymnals, please. 38. Blessed be the name. And we're going to be doing the first and the third stanzas. First and last stanzas. Stand with me, please. Hymn number 38, first and last. All praise. Carl, would you open us in prayer, please, tonight?
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you that you made available to us a midweek Wednesday evening Bible study. Lord, it's a very special time to be able to come together with our brothers and sisters in the Lord and get refreshed, get renewed, get refocused on your word. We ask, Lord, that you just help us to take that with us throughout the week and meditate on it and really digest it. And now, Lord, we ask that you be with Pastor Brown, that you give your words, and that you give us an ear to hear. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please be seated. And let me give you a couple of announcements. This coming tomorrow is Senior Saint Tea and Testimony time for ladies at the parsonage, 10 o'clock in the morning. So ladies, plan on that, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the parsonage. And on Saturday, 8:30 in the morning, church work day. And this is to get ready for Easter and SFM, which are just around the corner. So if you can, we'd appreciate your help. We do have several projects that we need to tackle. So that's starting at 8:30 on Saturday. Sunday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, deacons meeting. Next Thursday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, is Kingsman. And that'll be supper and meeting at 6:30 in the evening at the parsonage. And then, believe it or not, 1 week from Sunday, the 21st, is Resurrection Sunday. Hardly seems possible, but here we are. So we're planning on a great day together. Remember, it's a busy day, full day. 8:30 early service, breakfast downstairs, Sunday school, morning worship, lunch, and then an afternoon service, which is relatively brief, and that'll be the communion service. And then, one of the biggest events in our whole yearly calendar, the Striving for the Mastery Conference. This is our 6th one. Can you believe it? I was looking at that and said, have we really done it 5 times already? But we have. So I think registrations are somewhere 75. I talked to Pastor Tim at Hampton yesterday, and they have, I think, 17 registrations. So that'll bump it up to close to 90 probably. So it's going to be a great conference. We have Pastor Roy Kinney coming in, Pastor Nate Heyman, my brother Alan coming in. So it's going to be a really fun conference. So make sure you have registered. If you haven't gotten one of those sheets around the back counter, mark, obviously which of the electives you're taking, and get it to Scott or Jessica, or put it in Renee's mailbox in the copy room, so that she can start working on numbers for classrooms. Okay. I think that's all the announcements we need. Open your Bibles, please, to Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs chapter 1. Tonight, instead of working our way through a text, we're going to do a little bit of a topical study, or a word study. We're looking at the concept of wisdom in the book of Proverbs. Wisdom, and of course, the whole book of Proverbs is about wisdom. The whole thing is designed to get us excited about wisdom, to teach us what wisdom is, and to desire it, to be hungry for it. So let's have a working definition, just something to kind of get us started. And that would be something like, wisdom is the skill of applying the knowledge of God to the affairs of life. So wisdom is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge would be information or raw data or something like that. Wisdom is not just knowledge, it's not just facts. Wisdom is a skill. It's a learned skill. You can get better at it. You can become wiser. And it is specifically the skill of applying what the Bible says about God, about God's character, about God's decrees, about God's work, about God's desires. The knowledge of God, taking that knowledge and then applying it to, probably everybody in this room had problems today. Maybe little tiny problems, maybe big problems. But we apply the knowledge of God to the problems. Or relationships. Did you talk to anybody on the phone today? Or did you help somebody solve an issue in their own family, or whatever? Well, the wisdom is the knowledge of God applied to relationships. Or money. Did you spend any money today? If you didn't, good for you. You don't have to spend money to be happy. But if you spent money, does the knowledge of God apply to how and when you spend money? Sure, of course it does. Sure it does. And wisdom is what that is. That is the skill of applying the knowledge of who God is, what He wants from us, what He has done, what He is doing. So the knowledge of God applied to the affairs of life. So we're going to be looking at 5 things tonight in terms of wisdom. And because the whole book of Proverbs is about wisdom, we could actually take a lot more time. There's several dozen uses of the word wisdom, and that's without even getting into words like wise or wiser. So we're just looking at wisdom to limit our study. Otherwise, we'd be here for a long time. So first of all, I want to show you that wisdom begins with recognizing the value of wisdom. So right here in chapter 1, please look at verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding. And verse 3, to receive instruction and wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity. Look at chapter 2 and verse 1. My son, if you will receive my words and treasure my commandments within you, make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment, lift your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. So there is a recognition of the value of wisdom. Wisdom starts by saying wisdom is worthwhile. Did you ever have to take a class, say in high school, and as soon as you sat in the very first class, you realized, this is so boring, and I can't see any way that will ever apply to me? I had to take a few classes like that, especially in college. It's just a requirement. But you're sitting there and you're thinking, there's so many other things I could be doing with my time, and this is useless to me. Well, wisdom is the opposite of that. As you think about it, as you think about what wisdom can do for you and how you can live a life that's pleasing to the Lord, wisdom becomes more and more valuable in your mind. So, for example, flip over to chapter 4 and look at verse 7, 4:7. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom, and with all your acquiring, get understanding. Prize her, and she will exalt you. So, kind of interesting. The beginning of wisdom is get wisdom. Well, understand how valuable it is. Understand how precious it is. So Solomon, as you know, is one of the wealthiest men who ever lived. How could you even begin to calculate? We studied a little bit about him on Sunday. And 9,000 pounds of gold that the Queen of Sheba brought to him as a gift. But what he received by yearly installments was more than that. I mean, this is just crazy amounts of wealth. So he knows something about wealth and monetary value. But look in chapter 16, Proverbs 16. And in Proverbs 16, I want to look at verse 16, 16:16. How much better it is to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding as to be chosen above silver. There's actually several verses, several places in the book of Proverbs like this, where Solomon says, wisdom is better than rubies. Wisdom is better than silver. Wisdom is better than gold. And so there's a lot of places like that where monetary value is being compared with wisdom, and wisdom always comes out as more valuable. So there's a recognition of the value of it. And then in addition to that, there's this idea of leaning in. We've talked about that before, the inclined ear. So go back to chapter 2 and look at verse 2, 2:2. Make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. And so one of the first things we see about wisdom is you have to want it. You should be hungry for it. You should desire it. Why wouldn't somebody want wisdom? If you're kind of thinking of it as a fork in the road, and one road leads to wisdom, then what does the other road lead to, Nate? Pleasure, enjoyment. And very often somebody comes up to that fork in the road and they see this is the path of discipline, hard work, submission to authority, doing what I'm told to do, saving my money. Those are all elements, those are all components of wisdom. And they see that and they say, no, I'll go this way. That looks like fun. There's an amusement park and there's a Ferris wheel and there's whatever. Well, that is why sometimes people go the other way. They choose to not go the path of wisdom. They're going the opposite direction. So there's this element of incline your heart, lean in, desire wisdom. But now here's another key point. Wisdom is very much tied up with the fear of the Lord. So take a look in Proverbs 1 and verse 7. 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Notice there's an implied contrast there between the fear of the Lord. People who fear the Lord, they're going to get the beginning of knowledge. But fools, those who don't want anything to do with it, they go the opposite direction. Look also in chapter 2 and verse 6. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Look in chapter 9, Proverbs 9. And in Proverbs 9, we're going to look at verse 10. 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. There's others, but I'll take it to one more. Chapter 15, verse 33. Chapter 15 and verse 33. The fear of the Lord is the instruction for wisdom, and before honor comes humility. So, tell me now, how does this work? That wisdom, which sounds like a mental acuity, it's a mental skill, we usually think of it as. How is it that is connected to the fear of the Lord? How do they fit together? We see this, they're connected, but in what way? How? Yes. So we usually think of wisdom as smarts, intellect, somebody who has a high IQ or they've done really well in school, or they're really skillful at their job, or they can tear down an engine and put it together, whatever it might be. Is there a distinction between smart and wise? Shari says yes. Yeah. And so what is it? What's the difference?
Smart is intellectual.
Okay.
And wise is from your heart.
Okay. Shari.
It also says that the fool is wise in his own eyes too. And then it talks about the Greeks always desire knowledge.
Okay. So remember, this is what wisdom is. Wisdom is a skill of applying the knowledge of God to the affairs of life. Someone may not have a great IQ, but they could be really good at this. This would be a wise person. The flip side would be somebody who's got an IQ of 175. They're brilliant. They have a fantastic job. They're so smart. But when you look at the pattern of their life, the choices they make, the relationships they engage in, the priorities that they have, and maybe they have a lot of money, but then you look at how they spend their money, what they do with their money, and you think to yourself, they're not very wise. They may be smart, but they don't have this. So there is a connection between the fear of the Lord. Let's look at it again back in chapter 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and this was echoed in 15:33, where it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And furthermore, in chapter 2 and verse 6, for the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. So let's talk for a moment about the fear of the Lord and wisdom. What is the fear of the Lord? let me give you, go ahead.
I was gonna say respect and
Okay,
just understanding his sovereignty.
okay,
holiness.
okay. Understanding his holiness, his sovereignty. Um, Here's some things that the fear of the Lord is not. The fear of the Lord is not abject terror. It is not being so frightened that you can't think and you can't move, you're paralyzed. In fact, we find the Lord Jesus on several occasions saying, "Do not fear, it is I." Remember on the Sea of Galilee, a couple of different times in the storms, he specifically says, "Do not be afraid, it is I." He doesn't want us to be paralyzed. He doesn't want us to be so frightened you're like a deer in the headlights and you can't even move. However, if you go too far in the other direction, and I've heard people express it thusly, they say the fear of the Lord is simply reverential awe. That is that you're in awe of God, you're reverencing Him, but it's not really fear. I have a little problem with that. Can you guess what my problem is?
That's not what it says in the Bible.
It says the fear of the Lord. Maybe we can get at it. So I'm saying it's not terror, it's not paralysis, but it's also not, well, you know, I really respect God a lot. He's just really, he's earned my respect. You're not there yet. Somewhere in between here is the recognition, He is my Father, and I can be just as close to Him as I want to be. But He is not a human being. What is He? What is God? The Creator. He spoke and the world came into existence. He decided at some point in the distant past to make me. I'm here because of His good pleasure. He decided to make me. And so, you know, I loved my dad and I respected him. I also saw him discipline. Now, I won't tell you whether I got disciplined or not, but I can tell you that he disciplined my brothers and my sister. And there was a healthy, maybe slightly above respect, you know. It was, he could wield a belt pretty handily. Well, God is the Creator. Are you going to answer him? So this fear of the Lord, let's see if we can synthesize it. Let's see if we can put it into words that would help us. We're asking specifically, how is it that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? What do you think? So you see, I haven't seen one in a long time. There used to be bumper stickers around, I presume, put on their vehicles by Christian owners, and it would say, "God is my co-pilot." Sharon doesn't like it.
Because co-pilot seems like equal or maybe even not quite equal.
Okay.
God is everything. He's
Okay,
above everything.
we're on the right track now. Wisdom begins with recognizing who's in charge. Wisdom starts with acknowledging, I am not the boss. I am not the decider. Shari.
If wisdom is basically a response to what we know of God, then it sounds like the first response that we have when we come to know the Lord would be that we would fear Him.
Yes.
So that would be where it all starts.
You're right. I would say that's a good way of putting it. So, do you remember, some of you are old enough to remember, some of you maybe you're too young, when President Ronald Reagan was shot, the assassination attempt, and remember there were press conferences and all kinds, and Alexander Haig was the Secretary of State, and he stepped up to the microphone and he said, "Everybody be calm, everybody, it's okay, I'm in charge here." Do you remember that? There's one minor detail. The Constitution of the United States would indicate that he's not in charge. There's somebody higher than he, the vice president. The vice president was actually in charge when Ronald Reagan was incapacitated. Well, you know, we can say, everybody calm down now, I'm in charge. No, I'm not. God's in charge. The fear of the Lord means I acknowledge He's the boss of me. And from that fountain springs wisdom. That's where it begins. So whatever He says, I'm going to listen to. Whatever He says, this is your assignment, I'm going to say, okay, I'm on it. And that is the beginning of wisdom. So Carl pointed out there's a spiritual component built into wisdom, and that is true. So this is another reason why somebody can be very, very smart, but not wise at all. Because they may have a lot of intellect, but they do not have spiritual life. They don't have a connection to God. They don't know God. They don't fear God. And so they are never really going to be wise. They can be very smart. So the fear of the Lord. Now notice thirdly, there are negative consequences if we do not acquire wisdom. So go to chapter 1 again and look please at verse 20. And remember, this is a portrait of wisdom as if it were a woman in the streets calling out and saying, come listen to me. But then a lot of people don't listen. So I won't read the whole thing, but a little bit of it. So chapter 1, verse 20, Proverbs 1:20. Wisdom shouts in the street, she lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy street she cries out, at the entrance of the gates in the city she utters her sayings. How long, O naive ones, will you love being simple-minded? And scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. Turn to my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit on you. I'll make my words known to you. And now listen to the people who refuse to get a hold of wisdom. Because I called and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention. And you neglected all my counsel and did not want my reproof. I will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your dread comes like a storm, and your calamity comes like a whirlwind when distress and anguish come upon you. Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. There's more, but you get the picture. Wisdom is being personified, presented as if it's a person, a human being. And she's saying, I told you to listen to me. I told you to acquire wisdom. I was going to give you everything I had, and you turned away and you went the opposite direction. And now, calamity. What's calamity? A terrible, chaotic end, a horrible situation. Calamity has come, and you're searching desperately for help and answers, and you can't find it because you do not have wisdom. There are consequences for not being wise. And the consequences are you can make a mess of your life. You can really dead end. So there are negative consequences. Here's one particular area that's intriguing. Go to chapter 21. Proverbs 21. And take a look at verse 30. There is no wisdom and no understanding and no counsel against the Lord. So here's a paraphrase. If somebody decides that he's going to disobey God or rebel outright against God, and he says, I have a very clever plan. I've thought this through, and I've got a very clever plan on how I'm going to do this. Is there wisdom in his plan? Can't be. Because by definition, no wisdom goes against God. Wisdom goes where God goes, in the direction he's pointing. Nothing that's wise goes against God. So somebody who says, now I've got it all figured out. I'm really smart and I know how I'm going to do this. I remember years and years ago in New York State working with a family, and the guy, the husband, was big into stereo equipment. This is back when everybody had a big stereo set, and you had speakers, and I'm not sure if CDs had come on the market yet or not, but he had cassette and LP and radio, and he had an entire wall of this stuff. And, it was like 8 feet wide and 8 feet tall, and all these blinking lights, and I said, wow, that must have cost a lot. And then as I got to know them, I was in their home for Bible study. It turned out that he had run up such credit card indebtedness that he was borrowing from one card to pay the bill on another card, because he bought $10,000 worth of stereo equipment. And it was, he couldn't justify that with a salary. That's not wisdom. that doesn't work so good. And so there's no such thing as wisdom which disobeys God or rebels against him. Here's one more. Go to Proverbs chapter 3. There are great blessings associated with having wisdom. Chapter 3, and it really is much of the chapter. Again, I'm going to just kind of skip a few verses. I'm going to look at verse 13. It really goes all the way to the end of the chapter, but I'll read just a few verses. 3:13. How blessed is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her gain better than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. Long life is in her right hand, and her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who hold her fast. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps were broken up, and the skies drip with dew. My son, let them not vanish from your sight. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, so they will be life to your soul and adornment to your neck. And there's a lot more. The person who seeks and acquires wisdom acquires one of the greatest skills and assets in life. One of the most important things that a person can ever have. And you could be a multimillionaire, but if you don't have wisdom, you are impoverished. You could live in great poverty, but if you have wisdom, you're richer than a millionaire. And so there's great joy, great benefit to having wisdom. Questions or comments?
Matthew, on the news tonight, they were talking about, they're trying to pass this law to take life.
Yeah.
In other words, the person feels that, they have only so long to live, and
Yeah.
to me, that's not wisdom, because God gives life and God takes life, and I think we overlook it can because,
Yeah.
I just think that.
There are. You're probably aware. There are countries in Europe. Holland is one. Belgium is another. That under the heading of death with dignity, people who are terminally ill and they decide I want to die. Doctors can assist. Doctor-assisted suicide for terminally ill patients. And there's now reports coming out about how that is actually a slippery slope. And so I didn't read the article, but I saw a headline yesterday, I think, about a nurse from Belgium who is reporting on, you know what, I've seen some things that I think are really bad, as in doctors assisting people with suicide, and maybe they weren't terminally ill. And family members deciding for somebody else, I think that they would like to die. Here in the U.S. Yep. It's weird times we live in. This is not the country we grew up in. I think we need to remind ourselves that our first and ultimate loyalty is to Jesus Christ. We've always said that, but if you're like me, I've always kind of, in the back of my head, I've always said, well, but I'm an American. Well, we need to come to terms with the fact that the America that we have now is not what it was 50 years ago. And because it is becoming more and more rebellious against God and the Bible, we need to reaffirm that our first loyalty is to Jesus Christ. And I'm not being unpatriotic, I love my country. But we just need to recognize the Lord is our God. Yep. What else? Comments, questions? Take your prayer bulletins, please.